So I have the Heartland Motel versus United States. This is discussing a case that goes against the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and a man named Morton Rustin Jr. So, Morton Rustin Jr. was an attorney in Atlanta who owned the Heart of Atlanta Motel. It was considered a luxurious motel in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a committed segregationist who refused to rent rooms as a hotel to the black customers that were commuting between state to state. At the time, John F. Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act as a step toward any discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin, but he was assassinated. So then Lyndon B. Johnson took it over, and he actually enacted a stronger version of the act called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The owner of the motel challenged the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by filing suit against the government in the federal court, arguing that the passing of the act, Congress exceeded its Commerce Clause powers to regulate interstate commerce. So the problem was that whether or not Congress may force a private business owner to serve African Americans based on Congress's constitutional ability to regulate interstate commerce. So the Civil Rights Act. So one of the provisions of the Act, of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, forbids racial discrimination in public facilities engaged in interstate commerce. The Heart of Atlanta Motel in Atlanta, Georgia, refused to accept black customers in violation of the Act, and so that's what they're talking about. The Commerce Clause refers to Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So the Commerce Clause allows the government to control interstate commerce. He filed suit in the federal court saying that the law of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was an overly broad interpretation of the U.S. Constitution's Commerce Clause. And in the federal court, he went against 3 judges that all said that it was they were all for the United States. So then he appealed to the Supreme Court, who held that Congress acted within its powers to regulate interstate commerce when passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So they sided with the United States. At the time, it was the Warren Court with Chief Justice Earl Warren, and the person that wrote the opinion of the majority was Justice Clark. Justice Thomas Clark. Justice Clark wrote the majority opinion. It was 9-0 unanimously decided. And he said that he reviewed testimony showing that Americans had become increasingly mobile in the times because the car was becoming more readily available, transportation was easily accessible. And so he said that African Americans were discriminated against at hotels and motels, making them travel longer distances to find lodging. So it's changing the commerce between state to state because they wouldn't stay at the state inside of the hotel inside the state. And Justice Clark noted that under the Interstate Commerce Act, the power of Congress to promote interstate commerce also includes the power to regulate the local incidents thereof, including local activities of both the states of origin and Senate, and they weren't allowed to, basically, Congress was allowed to control the commerce of interstate. And so this was an important case to test the constitutionality of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because it was for civil rights. And we have other similar cases that all focus on desegregation. We have cases like Sweat vs. Painter, Brown vs. Board of Education, and Katzenbach vs. McClung, which are all in the civil rights era. They're trying to give rights to minorities that were being segregated. And so desegregation is taking down that social distinction between blacks and whites. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to have civil rights activists like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and people like that to form together. So that's why we have legislation like Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Commerce Clause. And so the Commerce Clause and Civil Rights Acts were both deemed constitutional because this was the first step, bump in the road for Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, they're saying that it wasn't constitutional, and the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of both the Civil Rights Act and the Commerce Clause with this case by saying that Congress was within its power to control interstate commerce. And this helps today because it allows minorities to feel less ostracized because we have people, civil rights activists like Martin Luther King Jr. in the past who was able to have help from legislation provided by Congress and the President. And this is my work citing.
Cool.